Welcome to another episode of the AlbumReview.net podcast. I'm Greg Potters. Returning to the AlbumReview.net podcast today is sports writer, music writer, and book author Andy Frye. Andy was a guest in 2022 on episode number 39, and I'm delighted to have him back again. For those of you who don't know, Andy Frye is currently a sports writer for Forbes and has previously written for Rolling Stone, ESPN, and several other publications. During our last conversation, we discussed in detail his book, 90 Days in the 90s, which was published in the summer of 2022. Andy has interviewed professional athletes such as Tom Brady, Venus Williams, Rory McIlroy, Shaquille O'Neal, and musicians such as Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins, Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine and Audioslave, Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains, and Noel Gallagher from Oasis, just to name a few. Andy's book, 90 Days in the 90s, which is strongly recommended. It's in the works to be optioned as a movie currently, so we're going to get into that today as well. And because Andy is a longtime resident of the city of Chicago, Illinois, and an advocate for the local music scene, he and I are going to talk in depth about some artists and bands from Chicago that you must put on your radar. So, with that said, enjoy episode number 85 and my discussion with author Andy Frye. Yeah, I wanted to dive into talking about the Chicago music scene, specifically the bands that you mentioned that I actually have been knee deep in listening to. So yeah, let's get right to it. Thanks for coming on. How's your week been so far?
Good. Yeah, pretty good. It's sunny here in Chicago, which does not mean it's warm in Chicago, but and I'm not Catholic anymore. But I heard that the
Big day.
new pope is from Chicago. So
I saw that. Yeah, and first American ever in the history of the Catholic Church, which I found interesting. So
yeah, it would have been better if he was wearing a Blackhawks or Cubs jersey. I'm sure
that might have wreaked a little havoc.
Yeah, they got a strict dress code, but they like to dress up, so why not?
That would be awesome. Yeah, you should see if you can get an interview with him, and you've got a connection already, right?
Well, yeah, I don't think he sports though, and it's not in a band, so I'm not really sure it would fit or what I'm doing right now. But yeah, thanks for the suggestion.
So you've been quite busy, my friend, over the last, year, more than a year. So let's recap. You published your book, 90 Days in the 90s, in June of 2022. So almost 3 years ago, which I read prior to our last episode that we recorded, which was episode number 39. So going way back. I'm in the midst of hitting episode 90. I'm a little slower than some of those other guys, but I try to put a lot of time into mine. and I really enjoyed the book, and we talked about it in episode 39. And in short, it's about a woman who goes back in time to the 1990s, where she relives her 20s, right? She was 20 or in her 20s when she goes back in time and relives that, especially the music of that time. And while all along, like, learning from her past experiences. So today, we're currently in May of 2025, your book's being optioned for a film, Andy. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it already has been. I worked that out about a year and a half ago, and it's still in the works. So it's not like I don't know if the script's done yet, but I know we're not shooting here this summer like I think one of the original stretch goals. But yeah, I got contacted by a guy in Texas who's done some documentaries, like short documentaries, and I think he's started to get into, his name's Cliff Killam,
Okay.
like real estate development.
Cool.
Like we all have like day jobs and stuff. So he runs his family business down there. He reached out to me first on LinkedIn, which I get all kinds of stuff on LinkedIn. I don't know if you
So do I. I need to talk to you about this, actually. I need to do a side note on this because I have a lot of questions for you. But yeah, please continue.
Yeah, I mean, I've always posted my stuff on LinkedIn that I do for my sports writing because I think I like LinkedIn less than I did, let's say, 2 years ago, because it's starting to act like Facebook. But long story short, I get these things like the supermodel who wants to meet me and do business to like somebody who can't even write a complete sentence wanting to engage in a business venture. And usually tell them to piss off or whatever. But yeah,
Yeah.
so this guy connected with me. I didn't know who he was. I just kind of like passed on it. And then he emailed me and he said, "Hey, I read your book. I wanted to talk to you about film, TV rights if you're open to it." I was like, "Yeah, sure." We connected via Zoom. We talked a bit, and I just kind of wanted to feel him out and see what he's done. So, long story short, last June I've got a lot of like little Gen X anecdotes I can tell you, little 90s anecdotes. But of course, I was in Austin last June, the first week of June, or maybe second week of June, of course, to see Alanis Morissette. And
Nice.
then top it off, Joan Jett was opening, and I had fifth row tickets. So it's me,
Nice.
my son, and my wife. It's kind of like her delayed Christmas gift because her birthday's in December. So we're there. I apparently got a text that I didn't see till the next morning. It was Cliff saying, "Hey, I'd like to jump on a call with you, and I've got the screenwriter director I want to introduce you to." So long story short, the screenwriter director, this is like an indie film, which hell, Tarantino still writes the scripts too. So
Sure.
with the 90s ethic. But yeah, his name is Alejandro Montoya Marin. He's studied under and done some work with Robert Rodriguez. Again, big 90s name.
Yeah.
Alejandro put out a movie the very end of last summer called The Unexpecteds with Matt Walsh. And you probably know Matt Walsh from
I do.
like
Yeah.
the Judd Apatow movies and The Hangover, etc.
Yeah.
So that showed in a couple film fests, and I think he's working with, I can't divulge the news, but let's say he's working
Sure.
with another very well-acclaimed 90s director who does a lot of DIY stuff, and they're partnering. So I think he's trying to get distribution on that film. So it's called The Unexpected. It's a great little fun film about people our age who get ripped off by like a crypto cowboy, and then there's guns and kidnapping and stuff in it, and they all go after the bad guys. So it's a typical fun comedy with a revenge plot. And yeah, so his other project is to work on the script for 90 Days in the 90s. I found out subsequently that both Cliff and Alejandro are huge Local H fans, and we can talk about Local H. And I've gotten to know Scott Lucas from Local H, just like a friend of the friend. But like when you're local to the music scene, like I don't play guitar, I'm not in a band. Maybe I'm a little bit of a super fan of music, as we all are. You get to know people, and so I want the different parties to meet, and we're even talking about like what role maybe Local H and Scott and he's basically a music production outfit. I think he just worked on with Blake Smith the most recent Nick Cave album. I'm
Mhm.
trying to get all the parties together, not really
Yeah.
knowing what the final budget is and when we're going to shoot and so on. So it's still work in progress. It's still in future tense, but it's exciting and fun that someone was interested enough in my book. And I think the story, like Cliff has done some work with different directors. He's got a couple of projects going. I think the story is something like he was out in LA, meet with some people, having a dinner with another director, and maybe some margaritas were involved, and eventually came up, "Hey, someone needs to do a movie about the 90s. Like, why hasn't anybody done the movie about the 90s?"
Yeah.
And supposedly he went either home or on Amazon and bought a bunch of books about the 90s, and my book was one of them, and
One
he
of
read
them.
it a couple of days, and that's where the conversation started about a year and a half ago. So yeah, I'm just trying to find out what's going on, or being patient to find out what's next, and we'll just go from there when we know more.
Yeah, well, it's an excellent book. Thank you for the context. It's an excellent book, and I read it twice, and that was what prompted me to have you on the podcast a few years ago, actually. And so I suggest anybody, even if you're not a fan of 90s music, you got to read it because I think if you're into music, you're going to relate to it. That producer wouldn't happen to be Richard Linklater. That was just one of my guesses.
No,
Of fame, Dazed and Confused, and other.
it's a director who's we'd probably have a beer with, and maybe
Yeah,
like
cool. Yeah,
look something on the side. It might
nice.
be like that. So
Yeah.
I'm allowed to divulge that.
No,
That's
it's fine. I'm just kidding.
Alejandro's
I
other
thought I would throw
project,
that out.
not mine. So I don't
Yeah.
know. It's just like a work in progress. Everybody's got a little bit of things to do, and we'll see when it starts. I'll let you know for sure.
Yeah, I want to talk to you again. I want to have you back on as things get underway or as things get completed. I'm sure at that point you might be busy depending on, I know authors, sometimes they have a lot of involvement, sometimes they have minimal, sometimes in some cases they have none,
Yeah.
depending on contracts and whatnot. But good luck. Good luck with all that, Andy. I'm excited. That's definitely going to be something I'm going to watch for sure. Side note on what you were saying earlier, to your point, yeah, I get a lot of reach out solicitations, and sometimes it's obvious and easy when it's BS, it's a scam, but like sometimes they're written really well, and I'm wondering whether it's real or not. And I tend to go by the mentality that if it sounds too good to be true, it
Yeah.
really is. Like, what is lately I've been just not responding to really any of them, which is not always healthy because I think you originally reached out to me a few years ago and I looked at your background and was like, oh, this guy looks really cool. This guy's got a lot of interesting musical tastes and he's an author, etc. So maybe that's not a good example because quickly, like within five
You say
seconds of reading
my musical tastes are too good to be true. I would agree with you on that.
yeah. No, just when I read yours, I guess maybe you're not a great example of what I'm trying to articulate because when I read your email and then I just quickly looked up your book and I was like, oh, okay, this looks legit. And this guy actually, he and I seem to have a lot in common. So that was a quick, easy. I think I emailed you back like 10 minutes later. But how do you manage all that or do you manage it? That's one thing that I'm struggling with. Like I get a lot now and I'm not really responding to many of them. And it could be for anything. Like, what are
I
you?
guess to get back to your like kind of what you don't want to miss opportunities. I remember so I had a zine
Yeah.
again, very, very 90s. I had a zine in the 90s. We even went so far as like me and my roommate, my best friend, set up like a second voicemail box. And I'm such a technological idiot that I didn't know with back when
Oh my.
Ameritech, you would pick up the phone and you hear the dial tone go choppy dial tone. That meant you had messages on your other one of your
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
maybe I didn't know how to check it, but I like we got free stuff. We got free like CDs and invitations to shows. I wonder if like I missed an opportunity to, I don't know, link it with link it with a publisher, get an interview or something because I didn't know how to check my freaking voicemail. So there's always that thing, but with LinkedIn, I got like, so I do some teaching on the side and I got a message from, of course,
Yep.
somebody in like Oman or something who's like, hey, I'm a big fan of your work that you do with this college you teach at. And I responded like, that's nice of you to say, but I'm like, how would you know about the college I teach? And I think you're full of BS
Yeah.
and no, I'm from the East Coast originally, so I could be rude when I need to,
Yeah, of
but
course. Yeah, it's in our blood.
yeah, I think yeah, it's kind of one of my little hobbies is whenever I get a text about the USPS package that I didn't pick up and I need to like
Oh, yeah, those are
typically
yeah.
respond in 5 minutes, especially since it's like the country code is like Singapore or India or
Yeah.
Papua New Guinea. Like, can you route that package to your mom? Thank you very much. And it'll
I
laugh.
get like some product reviews and things like that sometimes, or it'll be, hey, we'll send you this microphone if you could just do a review on it. And so no harm. I responded to the email. It looked like a legit email address. And I was like, sure, send me the mic. And I'm more than happy to do it. Or if you want to get on a call and if you need more, what's the word I'm looking for? If you need more of a guarantee that I'm not going to just run off and not do it. And I never heard from the guy again. So yeah, and then I've gotten emails from magazines and things like that. And then we want to do an article or an interview. And some of them have been legit, but some of them have been just totally fake, like not even real. A lot of times I'll just Google, like, is such and such a real online site or is it a way? So anyways, yeah, I was just curious because the number's been increasing over the last 6 months to a year. And I'm always curious again, sometimes they look obvious, but
I think the best thing is to be direct. So I had somebody contact me from I do some sports writing, and
yeah,
somebody contacted me through
still
LinkedIn.
right for Forbes, right?
It's
Yeah.
about he runs a sports media promotion company. It looks completely legit, but he asked about what my rate was, and I basically like I got summer off from teaching. I want to do what I want to do, and I said honestly, like for what you're asking, it would probably be like X dollars
Yeah.
for me to be worth my while and tell me more. And I never heard from him. So
Never heard from, yeah.
direct like that, and you talk money and they don't talk money, or they want to do a collabs, but they don't tell you what that is. Then usually being direct with people, I find is if people are legit, they're ready to get down to business. Otherwise, they find it confrontational and they F off. So
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, that's good. That's good advice. Yeah. I read your article you wrote recently, and this was before the draft, but you interviewed the head coach of the University of Colorado football team, Deion
Oh yeah.
Sanders. Excellent interview, man, about how he's helping to educate players on the importance of being financially responsible.
Yeah.
That was a Forbes interview, correct?
Yes. He's even more direct than me. So like I'm
Oh,
on
yeah.
or as you get to do a Zoom with these people sometimes, and like so he's all so yeah, coach. You have to call him Coach Prime because he's his
Right.
coach.
Right. Right.
He comes up and he's like, "Hey man, I'm just here to talk about the promotion of the business. Don't ask me about football." I'm like, "Well, okay, so let's talk about money then." And I'm into investing. I'm an investing geek, and my son who's 18 and a half is too. So I launched into that. I was like, "Hey, this is great." And my son's been saving his birthday money since he was in sixth grade, investing it, and he warmed up to that, and then we just got rolling. So I was
That's
going to be
great.
like, "What happened with playing this guard or wide receiver?" Like I knew he didn't want to be asked that. And I wasn't ready to ask that anyway.
Right. Right.
So I did tell him my son was going to University of Kansas and we have to root against me. He's like, "Hey man, join the club." Like that's typical Coach Prime Dion. He was great talking for 15 minutes. I talked to a really interesting golf influencer named Grace Charis, who started playing golf during the pandemic. And she knows that she's attractive and she uses that on Instagram, which long blonde hair,
Yeah.
pretty
Swinging
gets you.
golf clubs. That's going to get
Her
some likes.
content is not good, but her content is very good. It's very golf centric, and like she's blown up, and she didn't grow up with money at all, but she's now launched her own apparel line. I talked to her, I think maybe the same week I talked to Coach Prime. So it's, yeah, it's people who are famous and sometimes people who aren't famous. And I don't really get into the analytical or the sports tech stuff, and I don't like recap games, but
And you do short interviews too, right, Andy? Like they're the last ones I
I do.
remember listening. Like I remember listening to your Tom Brady one and your Serena Williams one, and they were like, correct me if I'm wrong, but they were like 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah, Venus, but
You're
yeah.
in some cases even Venus. I'm sorry, it was Venus Williams. You're right. Yeah, and you're not doing these long 3 hour conversations. Not many people are with those guys, but
The only one that was long was like, so strangely back about 2018 when I first started writing for Forbes, I got to interview. I was in contact with I have a friend who used to work for Big Three, Ice Cube's 3-on-3 league, which is it's really actually fun to watch. It's really cool. So I do a different city every weekend. And so my friend is like, who do you want to interview? I'm like, well, I grew up a Sixers fan. I've always wanted to meet or talk to Julius Erving. And then like it came back to literally like Dr. J didn't want to have like a little BS 15-minute interview. He's kind of like, he wants to talk for half an hour. Like, okay,
yeah,
all right,
cool.
dude.
I like that.
I was supposed to meet him at the Swiss Hotel, but I can't think his flight from Atlanta to Philly, or sorry, from Atlanta to Chicago got, I don't know, like not canceled, but postponed or something. And I had to jump a flight to London the next day. So we just did it via Zoom. Actually, not even via Zoom, it was via phone. It was great. Like I talked to him about old school basketball and how he coaches his team in Big Three. I don't think he's doing it anymore, but he's like super down to earth guy. I wanted to just like kind of person that you would have a conversation like over a 3 hour lunch with. So
Yeah,
sometimes we go a bit long. Sometimes I like to keep it short and sweet, obviously less editing and so on. And I don't really do my
totally.
podcast anymore, but yeah, sometimes like you just ask a couple questions, shut up, let them talk, and they'll come up with really interesting things for your article. So that's what I try
Yeah.
to let
It's the
that.
beauty of podcasting, right? That you can open up a door and you end up going in a direction you never. I interviewed a guy a musician who, in the middle of the interview, it told me that his father was arrested when when the guy who was on my podcast was roughly about 10 or 11 years old, and his father was arrested in their house because he was considered a somewhat of a affiliate of a mob boss in Scandinavia. So we're talking about music in his band, and then all of a sudden this conversation takes a huge left turn, which he opened up, right? So that's just an example of hundreds of thousands where a lot of times you can open up, listen to a podcast, and you get some gold. Now, how I was curious, and I think you answered a little bit of this. I went back and listened to our original episode that we did a couple of years ago on this podcast, episode number 39, when we were talking about your book. But remind me again, like how do you typically choose or select the people that you interview, Andy? Does Forbes connect you with these people, or are you? I think I
No,
remember
I
you.
feel
Yeah, I think I remember you saying this was like your thing.
yeah. Well, Forbes runs kind of like a blog for my like I got to stay in my lane and write about sports business. So which gets me out of like when people contact me about CBD or crypto, I'm like, yeah, I can't write about that. Where my normal response would be like, I don't want to write about that. But that started back when I was writing for ESPN. I did like one article about it went from like extreme sports you never heard of to kind of like a rock star sports hankering type of thing. So we probably talked about this last time. So related to what you just said about like you get surprises. I interviewed Billy Corgan, local hero at Smashing Pumpkins. Like a
Absolutely.
lot of people, I think he's fine. He's
He can get a
very
little
open.
angry quickly.
Well, yeah, I think he's more chill now, but like,
That's
yeah,
good.
go from like being in a band that nobody cares about to being a superstar, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden you have people questioning every lyric you write and asking why you shaved your head and
Right.
Kathy Lee Crosby show or whatever. Like
Right. Right.
I'm ornery when I haven't had my coffee in the morning. I'm sure that I can. Anyway, so he was great. He was kind of guard the first time I interviewed him. We talked about pro wrestling and why he started pro wrestling league,
That's
and then
right.
from that, I was like, well, let's see how many more. Like, apparently ESPN Page 2 wants this. It was around my birthday. I'm like, screw it. I want to see if I can interview Noel Gallagher from Oasis. I probably will get a no, but whatever. And I thought about my strategy. I was in sales for a while, so I always think these things out. Like, how
Yeah.
do I get the gatekeeper? What's the angle? And it just so happened that his new band was starting a tour and they were at Coachella. And I did some homework. And long story short, I found his publicist who was like, first of all, well, who are you? And do you really are for ESPN? And I had to get credentialed and all that stuff. But I interviewed Noel Gallagher when he's on his Midwest leg of the tour with the High Flying Birds. we're mostly talking about the band and music, but I made an observation. I was like, a couple of your videos you put out are about sports. You got one about boxing, where you're the referee in the boxing ring, and it's Zoe Bell, who's a she's a Zoe Bell is like beating up on her ex, just and it's about the ex getting punched in the face. Zoe Bell was in she's basically a stunt woman, but you might remember the Bruce Lee scene in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood,
Oh yeah.
where Brad Pitt throws
I
Bruce Lee in the
absolutely
car,
love that scene.
and the
Yeah.
woman comes out, she's like, "What the hell's
Yeah.
going on?" That's
Yeah.
Zoe. Like she's actually legit stunt woman, but she's a great actress too. So she
Oh,
was in
cool.
the video long ago. I'm like, so what's up with the sports thing? And he's talking about it, and he's like being like Morrissey, like, well, I like sports, but it doesn't really influence my writing. I'm not going to answer the question all the way. But somewhere along the line, I think I was maybe tapping at a question. That says, so what do you follow American sports at all? Or do you know anything about American sports? And he said, I don't get basketball, baseball, hockey, but I effing love football. And basically, it's that it goes on later at night. So he's like watching, this is a couple of years ago at least, but he's watching the NFL probably 1, 2 in the morning or when he's on tour.
Right.
I think it's just like English people who didn't grow up with the NFL. They love to see these people in these brightly colored helmets and uniforms smashing
Hitting
into
each
each other.
other. Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's different. Yeah.
And so, long story short, after that, I wrote the article. It was a lot of fun. A couple years later, I'm doing an email newsletter where I have to pick up choice quotes for this company I'm writing. Like, and it happened to be, I think, I don't remember what the topic was. It was like every month there was a different topic, and I would have to find quotes from famous people that they would put on pictures of them. And I just stumbled across one of the quotes from my ESPN article where Noel Gallagher says he loves football and why he got in the NFL. I was like, that's trippy and weird that
Yeah.
I don't know if the article was read widely or someone just scouring the internet for quotes from famous people, but that was cool. I just asked him about like, what do you think about American sports? Do you care? Oh, I love the NFL, this and that. And wouldn't shut up about it for a couple of minutes. And yeah, that somebody else thought my quote from that interview was interesting enough to stick on Brady quote. So that was weird trivia for me.
That headline would definitely catch my attention. So that's
It was
really
not even the
interesting.
headline. It was more Noel Gallagher has like solo tour, not Noel Gallagher breaking. Noel Gallagher loves the NFL. I've always done stuff like that to get back to your original question, where I've interviewed semi-famous people or famous people, and it just ramped up with ESPN, then going to Rolling Stone for a while. I got to interview baseball players, got to interview Gronk. And then with Forbes, I was on my own. And at the first month, I was just kind of reaching out to who I could get and reconnect with some publicists I had connections with. And I think I got to interview, I'm trying to think who like the first for Forbes, because that's been since 2018 to now.
Right.
It took a little while, but yeah, I just kept hearing from the same publicist. Like, we've got this athlete, and sometimes it was somebody who's like accomplished but not super famous. But then sometimes it's Lindsey Vohn's doing this speech for this like conference, American Express conference. It's a huge deal. And do you want to talk to her about it? Talk to Lindsey Vonn about entrepreneurship? Yeah, I'll talk to her about that. So I've gotten to pretty much interview everybody that I've ever wanted within reason. With a couple exceptions, like no Jordan, no Serena, no David Beckham, no LeBron. But I've interviewed Lindsey Vonn twice and Billie Jean King twice and Megan Rapinoe 3 times and Tom Brady once and
Yeah.
a couple of times. And so I've not done bad for a freelancer. And I just try to keep the same, whether I'm interviewing somebody who's like, I got to talk to a blind sprinter during the Olympics the last time around, who was like, I don't know how to, the blind sprinter was great. His name was David Brown. I thought like, I'm talking to him. I'm going to talk to him on FaceTime, recording the interview with my dictaphone, not sure, like, what do I ask him? Like,
Yeah.
hard to
What?
be like, I'm
How do I
thinking,
outline this one?
like, is it hard to be a blind sprinter? And he was literally, he's like cocky as hell, like in a good way though. But he's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to roll into Tokyo,
You
I'm going to
should
win a
be.
couple medals. I'm there to dominate. He only got 1 gold medal, by the way, but like he was refreshing to
Still.
talk to because I never heard of the dude. And he's just as measured and tenacious as like Jordan, LeBron, Megan Rapinoe, Alex Morgan, anybody you'd want to talk to who's in the top level of sports. But it was something that I wasn't familiar with. So that's how it goes. And I just keep it organic. And sometimes it's people you've never heard of. And sometimes it's Coach Prime. And
Sure.
I get 15 minutes on Zoom and we talk. And I try to treat them like normal people that I'm just having a conversation with, no gotcha questions. And
Right. That's the way to do it, right? That's the way to do it. And that's how you obviously spread the word. And it's almost like you want to not become memorable to them, but in some ways, I don't know. I look for feedback sometimes and ask people questions after I interview them. And so I'm always hoping that they say I'm genuine. And you're right about the no gotcha questions, but I also want to hopefully get them to open up a little bit more. And it sounds like you're doing a lot of that. So that's great. You also had a chance to interview Rory McIlroy, who's been a golf hero of mine for a while. And he just recently, I was in a really good place when he won the Masters several weeks ago.
I was cheering for
4 or 5 weeks ago.
Were
you?
Rose.
Yeah.
But I love Rory, so I'm glad that it wasn't Justin Rose versus Patrick Reed, because I would have probably shut the mouth right
Yeah.
away.
I just love that Rory's been an advocate for the PGA, regardless of what side you're on. There's LIV and there's the PGA, but I thought that was very commendable. But your musicians as well, in addition to Billy Corgan, you've had a chance to interview Tom Morello, Tom from Rage Against the Machine and Audioslave and other projects, Jerry Cantrell. These are 3-4 of my favorite bands from the 90s. Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins, Tom Morello, and Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains. And then you mentioned Noel as well. So I wanted to, before I guess diving a little bit deeper into the music, you also teach communications and business classes at Aurora University, right? And that's in Chicago or nearby. How's that been going?
It's good. That's about 50 miles away. So
okay.
I just finished my twice a week, 100-mile round trip, but
Wow.
Because of tariffs, the warning of the tariffs, I bought an EV. Like my wife and I were thinking about getting EV, and I said, these tariffs are coming. We should just do it sooner. But yeah, it's been good. I like to talk about real world experience with students. They're really great. And other than that, I don't know if you knew this, I DJ every Friday at CHIRP Radio in Chicago. So what I would say is maybe a segue into the music. I've taken my interview skill set from the big stars you've talked about and the legends that we all adore to reframe it towards a lot of local bands, because I write for the blog. It's very Chicago-centric, CHIRP Radio, which CHIRP stands for Chicago Independent Radio Project. So
okay.
I'm DJ MDash on Friday, 12 to 3. I've gotten to interview some great bands that we'll probably talk about here, like Neptune's Core. Bill Stevens from Naked Raygun has a new outfit called Violets, just did a thing with them.
Okay.
A really awesome Lady Gaga-esque musician named Madame Reaper with Madame Reaper and the Gentleman's Club. She's amazing. Got to interview her, I think, a couple months ago, maybe around New Year's. And I'd have to scratch my head to see who else I'm forgetting here. But
you gave me a bunch. Sorry to cut you off, Andy. You mentioned Neptune's Core. So I did a deep dive one day and just really, some of them stuck. Some of them I thought, oh, interesting, but not necessarily my cup of tea. But Neptune's Core and Frico were 2 out of the list that you gave me. There was Pink Squeeze and Fig Dish as well. Those were the 4 that I remember. And then, of course, there's the Almighty Rat Boys, which we'll get into in a minute. I'm going to have to be careful and not completely flip the tables and just make this podcast all about Rat Boys. But Neptune's Core and Frico, it's funny. You caught me at a time when you reached out to me about a month or so ago to talk about this. You turned me on to Neptune's Core. I've been in a phase where I've been listening to a lot of similar bands that kind of have that 90s sound, even though they're recent and are fronted by female lead singers. In the case in point of Neptune's Core, it's 4 women, two sets of sisters, which I thought was really cool. And for the last month and a half, almost every day, I've been blaring their song Inside. them. A part of what I want to do, obviously, is get more of the, I guess, highlight a little bit more about some of these bands. But if you don't mind, what do you know about Neptune's Core, and how big and wide are they known in the Chicago local area?
Well, it's weird because I think that they were just signed management-wise with Jim Merlis's.
Doesn't surprise me. Yeah, okay.
Was it Big Hassle Media is his outfit, I think. But I don't think they're signed record label-wise. Anyway, so about a year ago, my son had tickets to see Frico and Neptune's Core, and there's another band in there who's...
Oh, wow, together. Okay.
And so I was like, okay, like, hey, Dad, can you give me tickets, money for this show I want to go see? Yeah, sure. Could take out the garbage and you mow the lawn. Rico's kind of a little bit more. I have never interviewed them. They're a trio that's more of an avant-garde pop outfit, very different from that.
They remind me of Radiohead a lot. That was my take, and they actually cover some Radiohead stuff.
Emotionally, yeah, but I feel like some of their stuff is a little more, obviously more upbeat, a little more poppy.
Okay.
Than
okay.
Maybe if you take D-Light and Radiohead and smash them
together,
I
like that. That's a good blender.
Ability to throw some funk in and some. When Prince said, like, I think of that, some of one of the lead singers, I don't know his name. I think to me sounds like when Prince sings in a falsetto, and Prince is all over the place musically, and it all still works. I think that they're more influenced by Prince than I probably thought about.
Really? Okay.
Started. So, but yeah, there's the Radiohead flavor to it. So they're very different from Neptune's Core. Neptune's Core is more measured in it. So I kind of asked myself, like, who are these bands you seeing? And then who's this Neptune's Core? He's like, at the time, one of his friends was dating the drummer Caitlin, and I knew that was happening. It's like, well, they go to Jones. My son goes to Lane Tech. So we've got friends of friends and stuff. And so I thought it was cool that he was seeing a band, mainly Neptune's Core, where the kids are in high school. So I think, yeah, two of them are graduated. One's at U of I.
Okay.
McGill, and then the other two, I think, are still in high school, like 11th graders. Maybe they're seniors, I don't remember. But so they're pretty precocious. And then the side story, when I was asking about this band, like Neptune's Core, okay, cool. CHIRP Radio was doing kind of a sit down on a Sunday afternoon with them at a venue called Shuba's, where they're talking about their music. And then on top of that, I heard that they took a week off of school to travel to South by Southwest to do one or two shows at South by Southwest, and then, as is typical, doing some shows outside in the venues that are not, they're participating in the week, but they're not part of South by Southwest. So they did like 5 shows during like a week off of school, which when I was in high school, I didn't have the wherewithal to make it downtown in Philadelphia to see a show on my own, much less to go play a show.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I thought that was pretty remarkable, and I got into their music, and it's poppy and mellow. It's very different from Frico, but I'm impressed with their drive and their talent level, but in teens, to be able to pull that off and make it go. And then also, like, two of them are going to college, but they're still doing the band thing. So yeah, pretty amazing. And I reached out to them and said, hey, we'll do like a interview blog. And I had also bumped into serendipitously and met the lead singer, Sophie, maybe July last year when I was out with a friend, just walking around one of the day. I was like, hey, aren't you in Neptune's Core? And got in a conversation. And yeah, so it's just a small world in Chicago on the north side.
I'm sure it is. Yeah. You said they're playing Shubas in about a month, 5 weeks, something like that. Shubas is a indoor or outdoor venue?
Oh, it's indoor.
Okay.
Yeah, I got tickets to see the show. I decided to buy tickets and support the band. And
nice. Good for you. That's awesome. Yeah, let's hope they stick together. I know college can sometimes rip a band apart unless they all go to the same college. But I know my high school band, once we graduated, unfortunately, we went our separate ways. And I always had this vision that we were all going to go to the same school and just continue, but they had other ideas. So yeah, Neptune's Core. Let me ask you quick. I know every year, and it's been like this for a while now, but the Lollapalooza Festival is now every year in the summertime in Chicago. Are you going this year? Do you have any plans to go?
I don't typically go to Lollapalooza. Now it's more, and I'm not denigrating, it's more of a pop fest. So, but a couple of years ago, I had some friends go to see Metallica just for Metallica. They usually, and so I tend to go to Riot Fest. You pick a day that you want to go.
Okay.
Because if you buy all 3 days,
well, Sunday, first of all, it's like $400 or $500 at least.
Yeah, but then by Sunday, you're like, I'm so tired, I can't.
I'm done. Right. It's a 4-day festival. It's Thursday through. Yeah, I mention it because I'm thinking about it.
Contemplating it, yeah. So
I'm contemplating
3 days, but last year it was Chapel Rowan. So a little side story. I'm in New York in June. I take a picture of myself in front of the Ghostbusters, like the garage, it's in Tribeca.
Yeah, the headquarters.
I post it, and like 5 minutes later, I hear from my friend Mogan, who's a roadie, Mogan Brown. And he's like, I just did that the other day. I'm in New York. I'm like, what are you doing in New York? He's like, I'm doing I think he said the Tonight Show. I'm like, okay, I know you're a roadie, but like with who? He's like with Chapel Rowan. And I'm like, okay, I think I know who that is. Scroll, scroll, like, what is she saying? Because I'm not paying attention.
Yeah.
Jimmy Fallon, yeah, it's Jimmy Fallon's show. I think it's the Tonight Show. All right, right. So he was there roadieing for her, and then I think that was at the end of his gig with her. He had was just helping her out for a while, and I think, yeah, either I knew or I was half paying attention to the fact that she was basically headlining Lala right when she was starting to get really big and maybe hitting the pop radio airwaves, appearing on the Tonight Show, all came together for her. And I think a lot of people who were ahead of the curve ahead of me for sure, who knew about her songs had already bought out those tickets for that day of Lollapalooza. So I think they still do really creative, interesting things. I'm more of a punk alternative fan, and Riot Fest is where
Same. Yeah. The pop thing is not as much. The headliners didn't grab me as much. I don't want to disparage either, but part of what drew my attention to it was when Rat Boys came to Boston a couple months ago. They told me that they were doing that gig, and they were like, "Hey, let us know if you come." And I looked at the list, and they're playing in the afternoon the first day on Thursday. But I really, and this is going to date myself, but I really didn't know, with the exception of the headliners each night, I really didn't know a lot of the bands. So my wife tells me that a lot of them are more on the pop than the kind of 90s alternative.
Yeah, so if you come into town to see Rat Boys, I definitely got to force you to have a shot of Malort. We'll get some Chicago style pizza. I don't eat
Man.
beef.
Yeah.
If you want Italian beef, we could do that.
Yeah. And just to piggyback what you were saying about Frico, the song that really, really moved me a lot was one of their tracks called Where We've Been.
"20 years spent above this place. You could smell the iron from the room. And the train was running through the window, carrying a pillow so I could lay my head down onto you. Dirty drawers and an awful stench. My stomach made of stick and glue. A fortress built between the four rooms, huddled in a dorm room. You took it out of me, and your teeth hurt more than the day before. It's time to get another job. 4 feet between a wall and window will make your wife a widow. So throw your arms around me. Now I don't know where we go from here. No. I spent 1 year and I gave it up. Sickness brought you to your parents. A life of lonely errands will make a fool of ya. And your teeth hurt more than the day before. It's time to get another job. 4 feet between a wall and window will make your wife a widow. So throw your arms around me. The truth is hard to bear.
So Neptune's Core, Frico, thank you for giving me a background on that. What do you know about Pink Squeeze? I noticed I was intrigued by them. They advertise themselves as a queer power pop 4-piece band out of the gate. Listen to some of their stuff. It didn't necessarily grab me, but part of obviously what I wanted to do in this conversation is highlight different Chicago area bands, because I've seemed to have grown really accustomed and liking a lot of these bands. I don't know if there's a certain sound that's coming out of the city that's similar with a lot of bands. Not that it's like the Seattle sound, but we all know, any of us that are over the age of 40 know all about the Seattle sound in the 90s, right? So what is your thought on Pink Squeeze, and like, what has been your experience at all with them, if any?
Yeah, well, Pink Squeeze, before I started volunteering for CHIRP Radio, I heard there's a song that I may have sent you called Summer in Chicago, which is like their flagship single.
Okay.
And I guess they're probably age-wise, they're probably technically Gen Z. They're
Oh, yeah.
Gen. And they always wear pink. Like,
these are all young. These are all young. Yeah.
Young and fun. Their shows are super fun. I saw them over for Skating Polly is originally from Oklahoma. To me, they sound like Veruca Salt, but a little bit darker. Okay. Chicago. But the background in Chicago is, I would say, Chicago, maybe it's influencing sound is definitely power pop. You think of like
power pop. Yeah.
Think of like it's starting with Cheap Trick here. And there's all different types of bands. Yeah, there's some blues here, but you can hear a little bit of Cheap Trick and power pop in Fig Dish. You can hear it, a different version of it in Pink Squeeze. You can hear it in a little bit in Rat Boys. So we talk about Rat Boys a little later with a more eclectic sound with a little bit of country jangle in it. But
a little bit. Yep.
I had never seen them. I wanted to see them. I had never seen Skating Polly. I saw them at this little venue called the Cobra Lounge, where I also saw the Subhumans are just old guys who are punk who are still slagging off the Queen. So I was like, I'm going back.
Subhumans have been around for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, the Pink Squeeze is super fun. They're definitely very vocal about queer rights. And yeah, they have a pop sound that's very, I'd say emotional, but not overly emotional. They blend the kind of not the dream pop, but like the pop sensibility, to use is sort of an industry term, with the fact that they are unabashedly, it's less about pushing politics. It's more about like the queer experience in a way that I think is like
just normalizing it, right? Like I feel like
we have good days, bad days, and our lyrics talk about the experience without hitting you over the head with it.
Right.
And if you see them live, they're just having a super fun time. So
yeah. I liked their song Midday Midnight. That one I was attracted to. And then there's a heavier band that I really like that you told me about. They've been around a lot longer, but I guess they're still going strong. Band called Fig Dish, Figdish. They've got a track called Chew Toy.
obsessed, but I can't even get upset. We feed the largest ones first, wide-eyed till they burst. I feel the pause before the fact. Suggest we hand it down, but you insist we give it back. I feel the dawn, I feel the rut. Na 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 na. You say the if I get in, but na 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 na. I fear you give me what you got. Na 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 na. I feel the dawn, I fear the rush. Na 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 na. Ability to distract, something I never had, something you'll never lack.
Oh, that's actually from the first album. So
Oh,
here's
it
this-
is. Okay.
I wrote down a Fig Dish. I always forget what I think Chew Toy's in the first album. Yeah, it's on. So it's four guys who are a hair older than me. They're mid-50s. They were part of a couple of, so in the mid-90s, it all started with, I would say like early to mid-90s. It all started out with Material Issue. So Material Issue had a couple of albums out there. They were on college radio. They kind of hit it big even before Smashing Pumpkins did. And they had a very radio-friendly but alternative power pop sound. So there's a song called Valerie Loves Me, which is their one tune in a minor key. And they've got Kim the Waitress, which is a cover. Really like definitely you could hear from the band that they were the real deal and they wanted to be famous. They actually have an album called International Pop Overthrow. That says it all. So they came out, and then you had a little bit of kitsch, the same, I guess the summer of '93, with a band called Urge Overkill, which are basically a bunch of disciples of Neil Diamond. And they even dressed at the time with like the white suits, the gold chain, the medallions, like they really did it up.
Yep.
And then things kind of shifted into the grunge and what we tend to think of with the 90s with Smashing Pumpkins got big, summer of '93 with Siamese Dream. And then you had a couple bands that had the power pop thing going on, but more of a grungy sound. So I talk about Local H is the one that stands out. They're still together. Local H to me, and I think unintentionally on their part, sound very much like Nirvana. Like if you listen to a couple of their songs, like, yeah, I can hear Nirvana. If you didn't know anything about them, you were cynical, you might say, oh, these guys are a Nirvana ripoff, which they're not. But cut from that same cloth, you've got Triple Fast Action, which is a little bit more angry in a different way and snarky. And then you've got Fig Dish, and Fig Dish is more like, we don't give a shit, we're just like having fun with it. And all of their albums are like, let's just read the albums they're called, well, the first one that we talked about with
That's what love songs often do, right?
Great album. It's my favorite, probably.
When
the second,
when Shub goes back to Push.
Yeah, that's hilarious. And then because basically the songs they wrote for this third album, which came out end of last summer, had been out there for a while. I think they got dropped from their label, but the songs are so great. They named their album Feels Like the First Two Times.
Yeah.
And it's the same feel. It sounds great. We've been playing on CHIRP Radio. My favorite song on that album is called Cellophane and Sulfur. I have no idea what that song's about, but it's just a little bit power pop, a little bit Beach Boys, a little bit grunge. Just, we don't give a damn. We're just going to have fun with this.
Yeah.
So yeah, they've got back together. I got to go to their show at the Ginger Man, which is a very small place. That's not always a music venue. It's a bar that sometimes selectively will play show bands they want to show. And so I reached out to them I got to know their publicist, and she's like, hey, you want to interview? I'm like, hell yeah. So I talked to the guys who are the guitarist singers, Blake Smith and Rick Ness. And Rick Ness is now a full-time college professor up at University of Wisconsin. Blake he's done some work with kind of live music production with Hard Rock Hotel and a couple of different jobs in that area, but also helps, like, I guess maybe not produces, but sound mixes music is the term. As a non-AV guy, that's the term I would use, that they mix music. And like I said, Blake has worked with Scott Lucas from Local H, and they did some work with Nick Cave last summer.
Yep.
And so they're just like down to earth guys, literally talking with them on an afternoon like today where it's sunny. I think Blake has come back from the store. He's on his phone doing FaceTime, and I'm talking with Rick, who's up in Wisconsin. And we first started talking about like the bands we listen to. Like, I'm telling them I love Husker Du, and they're like, yeah, I love Husker Du, but like all the jocks, they're a little bit older than me, so maybe they're late 80s. I graduated in 1990s. They probably like high school, class of 87, maybe. Yeah, like the jocks that used to pick on us would listen to Van Halen and Ted Nugent, but I was really into Husker Du and the Pixies, and that's where we went. And basically, they met in like seventh grade, and they've always been friends since. And they had this band that they had in high school, which was like they went to college and came back, and they're like, well, let's do this band and let's plug in and make it for real. And yeah, they were on Capitol Records, had those first two albums, which are great. Toured, I don't remember who they toured with, but Blake used to date Nina from Veruca Salt. So I think, at least in Chicago in the early days, they did some
Shows.
work with them.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's always the thing with like the bands you like. You always think like they're a secret that I know about. I love them. Not enough people know about them. I wish they were famous, more famous. They should be more famous.
Right.
But then you
Agree.
take delight of the fact that like there's a little known secret that you know about. So
It's always fun, right?
Yeah.
And friends will always, a lot of my friends remember, they're like, I remember when you first told me about this one band and you were the only one and we would make fun of you. And then we see them out on MTV or on the radio or whatever, right? So yeah, what's cool, what I really liked too, Andy, about Fig Dish was the album that you mentioned, the most recent album, Feels Like the Very First Two Times. I love that title. That was their first, if I remember correctly, that was their first album in 27 years. So they went on a hiatus and came back. So these guys all went their separate directions and then regrouped and recorded this album and put it out last year. So definitely a band that I think people need to go check out. With them,
sense that they're the kind of friends that have been like ever since we had smartphones, like they're probably texting each other every day, just like inside jokes. And
right.
It's not like they really broke up when they're separate. Yes, they did in some ways. Like Blake's still in Chicago, Rick's up in Wisconsin.
Right.
Williston, the bass player, he's in the wine business. He lives out in Oregon, but he flew back for the Local 8 show, the relief show that they did for the wildfires back in January. So I get the sense that like these guys have always been super close, and then they just thought, well, yeah, why don't we just like, we got these songs, like, isn't it time that we recorded this stuff? And
Yeah.
so with a label called Forge Again Records, which is kind of like merged in that I think they picked up some of those bands that have been around since the 90s and either bought their catalog or recorded new stuff with them based here in Chicago. And it's just the perfect timing for them to come together and do that. So
Yeah.
I've got tickets to see them. They're doing two shows. The one show here at, I think Subterranean is 21 plus. And one of my sons met Blake so I wanted to see the show with him. So we're going to go see the Milwaukee show at the X-Ray Arcade, which is a great little tiny ass venue with like pinball machines and
Oh man. Oh, that sounds amazing.
What you'd expect from Wisconsin, pretty much.
Yeah,
like
right.
Packers fans. But so we're going to that, I think mid to late July. And I was bugging Blake. He read my book too, and he's like, originally he was like, hey, this needs to be made into a movie. It's funny that you mentioned that. And we got in a conversation about whether, I don't know what's going to happen. I'd love for them to do the music supervision on the movie if it happens. But nonetheless, he said, like, I read this book in 2 days, totally awesome. And I was like, yeah, I want to see your band. When are you doing the show, dude? And
Yeah.
actually, like, soon, but hang tight. So that as soon as the tickets were announced, I'm like, done, I bought them.
I'm sure you're probably giving them inspiration, right? So that's really cool too, that you go to shows with your son and you share musical tastes. My kids are a little younger. They're in their early teens, but I tried really hard and I had a decent run where I brought one of my boys to Radiohead when they came to the Boston Garden. And then my other son, well, he was really young, but we saw Hall & Oates and yeah, but now they're into the stuff that doesn't necessarily grab me. So I'm a little jealous. But hey, to each his own, right? So I wanted to talk about Rat Boys because I think what prompted you the second time to reach out, or part of it was, I'm so glad you did, by the way. If anything, even if it's not to be on the show, just to say hello. Probably my favorite thing of doing this is, for the last 5 years now, has been meeting really great people, like-minded people all over, not just the US, but all over the frickin' world, which has been amazing. So, but I was on my way to the Outlaw Music Festival last summer, and I just got the word that Willie Nelson was not healthy, so he was not going to play, but his son Lucas, who I won't dive into now, but he's amazing. He covered for Willie and did an amazing job, but Bob Dylan was there and Robert Plant was there, and those shows were really good. But What I remember the most about that show was the drive down. They played at a venue called, I still call it Great Woods, and I actually have a shirt that says that. It used to be called the Great Woods Performing Arts Center. It's now the name of a corporation, like most of those outdoor 10, 15,000 seat pavilions are. But I'm in the car with some friends of mine, and I'm like, we're at a red light, and I'm like, what is this on the radio right now? And it, of course, wasn't the radio. My friend was playing music on Spotify through his phone. And he goes, oh, this is Rat Boys. And I instantly thought, full honesty, wow, that's a terrible name. And I thought, are these guys from like a 70s punk band from London? Because this doesn't sound like a 70s punk band from London, but that name sure does. And he goes, no, this is my friend. He says, no, they're a band that's only been around for about 10 years from Chicago. And the song was Black Earth, Wisconsin. And in the last, 5 years, I can't think of a song that has affected me as much as that song. And so much so that I just dove into their music and into their albums, and then saw that they were coming to Boston, approached them, couldn't have been nicer, spent an hour and a half at the first show talking to them. And then the second time they came to Boston was only about 3 months ago. I spent a good 2 hours. I actually missed Kim Deal. I missed the majority. Sorry, Kim. I missed the majority of the band they were opening for, Kim Deal, to hang out and chat with them. And then I get your email not long after, like, hey, I saw you did an episode with one of the members of Rat Boys, which I did. I interviewed Sean Newman, who's their bass player, and that's on episode number 79. But I just feel really grateful to have seen them in concert twice, and then also getting to know them. Has Rat Boys been on your radar, Andy?
I'm always late to the party. Probably during the pandemic, I was picked up. During the pandemic, I picked
later
up
to the party than you are.
Yeah, well, like during the pandemic, I for whatever reason I started listening more to independent radio, and I think it was, I'm not sure why, but there's a couple bands there, and right after, like there's a band from LA who lives in Brooklyn now called Mama. I got to see them. They sound like Luke Salt.
Yes, I know that too. Yeah.
Katie Colley, who's been around for a while, and Rat Boys was one that kind of popped up. Maybe I heard him on CHIRP or LUW is the radio station for Royal. I heard him on one of the local independent radio stations. And I think the first song I heard was Alien with a Sleep Mask On from that album in 2020. That was Printer's Devil.
Printer's Devil. Yep.
So it was just one of those songs, very power pop in a way, in a more laid back way. But so I think I clued into that, and I want to say their sound is all over the place, but it's a little bit more eclectic than just that song.
I would agree.
Julia Steiner's voice is just sweet and unique and very friendly in a way,
Yeah.
which is not what
Very
you get.
inviting. Yeah.
You don't get that in alternative music a lot.
Agreed.
So yeah, I'm not like a super fan. I know all their albums and all their songs, but there's about a dozen songs that I think stand out. A couple off that Prince Devil album and the album from 2023 called Morning Zoo.
Yep.
They've got
The
this
Window.
one. What's that? Oh,
The Window. The Window is the album. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Morning Zoo is the song to me that sounds like
It's excellent.
She's Electric by Oasis. It's got kind of that jangly
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good comparison.
intro, and then it's just obviously her voice is very different from Liam Gallagher, but it's got like a laid back, stompy feel. And then there's Elvis in the Freezer, which is just a little out there.
Yep.
Also kind of like a lullaby in a way.
Yep.
So it's not a typical, they don't have like a sound that you'd typically think of an alternative band from Chicago. And I don't know where their energies and their influences are from. They're probably everything.
It's a lot of like, sorry to cut you off. It's a lot of similar bands. Palehound Mama is another one. The Beths, that's another one, if you've ever heard of them. But like Sean gave me this list of bands that he admitted that he was influenced by, and the other, Julia and the other guys, Julia, Dave, Sean, and Marcus. So Julia, Dave, Sean, and Marcus. And a lot of the bands that they mentioned were similar in how they sound, but yet, in my opinion, I feel like Rat Boys has, if I can geek out for a second, really edgier. And to me, they sound like a 90s band. And when I heard the Beths and when I heard Palehound, I really enjoyed listening to them. But there was something about Rat Boys where every song I was saying to my friends at this Outlaw Music Festival, I can't wait to get back in the car and listen to Rat Boys. Like, please play me a song that I'm not going to like. And I don't know how it happened. Within a couple days, I was roaming around my neighborhood with my group of friends that I pal around with and sharing it with them. And they were like, oh yeah, that's okay. So I feel like they're mine in a way. And I'm grateful that my friend Tim introduced me to them, but I'm also even more grateful that I've developed a friendship with them. And that's also what is maybe leaning me to think about going to Lollapalooza. But yeah, you've, in addition to Neptune's Core, Freako, Fig Dish, Pink Squeeze, the other bands you mentioned, you helped remind me, Andy, that there really are a lot of great bands. There's a lot of great music, stuff that I think can really get into in the Chicago area. It's prompted me to go out and look more in Boston, where I live. And I have yet to really find a group of bands that are at this point in their career, somewhat early, but not super early, that I enjoy as much as the Chicago scene. So I think there's something going on there, man, or there has been, and this is probably no news to you.
It's not really even a link to a sound. So I think of like, there's one of the bands that gets played on Q101 and is called Sincere Engineer. And they're more just like a straight punk band, whereas like, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I think they've got a very consistent sound where I don't think that Rat Boys sounds like Led Zeppelin, but like Led Zeppelin, like the album, every song has a different kind of vibe, a different sound. And it not in a way that makes you think that they're all over the place. It's just like, wow, they've got a different angle, a different emotion, a different tone for every song. And you don't see that as much anymore, I guess. But then you've got Fig Dish has kind of more, they've got their sound and it's a little tongue in cheek, as are their lyrics. And then to take it back to, I mentioned Madame Reaper and the Gentleman's Club. Madame Reaper is, she's Kira Ledholm is her name. She's got she went to college at both University of Chicago and Northwestern. So she's super smart to begin with.
Big time.
And she's got this, I would say Lady Gaga, but it's almost like when I interviewed her back around New Year's, that her influences are very like 80s and synth pop, very influenced by some of the better and even some of the bad synth pop from the 80s, but also Prince and Bowie. And she's, for as much as I might say that she's got a Lady Gaga type of act, she's part Alice Cooper, part Lady Gaga, and she's really puts on a live show. And I'm just waiting for her to be super famous because she's super talented. And I'm not even like a big pop fan, but listen to her song called Utopia off of the latest album.
I will. Thanks for the recommendation.
Like a softly political anthem that is very radio friendly, very pop, but like, even if you're a rock person like I am, you can't not love it.
Yeah. I admire the fact that you do have somewhat of a core genre that you like, but that you're also able to appreciate good music, even if it's in a genre that you might not necessarily run out and go buy tickets to every show or whatever. So that's really cool. I feel similar that I can appreciate an artist who is talented, and it might not necessarily be the music that's up my alley, but I enjoy listening to them. What was it? Oh my God. See, now if my kids listen to this episode, they're gonna laugh at me. I think it's Lizzo. When I first heard Lizzo, it was in an interview, and I thought, oh, not really my cup of tea. But then I heard her play, I think it was the tenor saxophone, and or no, it was the clarinet or the flute. And I was like, what the hell? This girl is talented.
Well, I think her singing is just good enough. I was on a podcast with somebody about a year and a half ago, and they do this like rapid fire question at the end. And one of the questions was Cardi B or Nicki Minaj. I was like, neither, Lizzo, because I think
I would have said the same thing.
She's part of the same band of pop, like super pop, that you'll have to go see her in a stadium. But as far as the talent goes, I think Lizzo's just supremely talented in the way that whether you like her music or not, Adele is, or
right, yeah,
and mega star, and there's a level of authenticity there.
Yeah,
I'm not going to go into why we may or may not like Nicki Minaj, but with Lizzo, it's just like she is who she is, and she's not trying to be anything different, and she's got a little bit of flair. And case in point, like when she was on SNL as the musical guest with Eddie Murphy. Like she's bigger than life, and you could tell that she was just like, "Oh my God, I get to be on the show."
Right.
Like, and she was just beaming ear to ear, and then Eddie Murphy's like, "Well, you're the big star here, not like, yeah, I've been around the block, but like, let's focus on you."
He's very humble. He appears very humble, at least to me.
I either want to have a beer with Eddie Murphy, or I want to like go to my neighborhood, like prank my neighbors.
Yeah, right. Knock on the door, and yeah, I don't know if he's on the list of people. If I was in his presence, I don't know if I would. David Gilmour is another one. I don't know if I'd be able to form words. It would be difficult. I'd have to really put on a normal face. But it's funny, you mentioned Cardi B. I find it interesting that she likes to record and post audio of her pooping. And
Is
that
her next album or latest album? Or
I don't know. I listened to the Howard Stern show, and they replay a lot of audio that she posts on her own, I think it's Instagram page, and it's like detailed stuff. And that's an interesting one. But anyway, I just had to mention that because you brought her name. You brought her name up.
Cardi B, that's a potential joke there. Like, newest album out. She picks up some new instruments, but
yeah. Well, so as we're getting close to wrapping up, Andy, I guess like you and I grew up around the same time, and you shared your story with me last time about being from Philly, moving to Chicago, and living in Chicago now for multiple decades. Yeah. What is it like? There's something about the 90s that draws me in, and I think it's one of the clearer items is it's just when I was impressionable. We had a colleague or a friend on a recent episode, and we talked about what music meant to us when we were younger and why it maybe meant a little bit more. And I don't want to bother getting into that, but like for you, what is it about the genre that attracts you? Can you, and that might not even be something that I think it may be like a science, right? But like I'm wondering if you might be able to put a stamp on that.
Well, so I think the main thing is authenticity. Like if I had to typecast Gen X, just like I typecast Gen Z and make
please do it. Yeah.
Taste of music. It's Gen X were overly concerned with authenticity. And I think it really,
big time,
whether you were to think about just the span of music that you would listen to in the 90s I mentioned D-Light before, like in the 80s, you had to be a metal person or you had to be really into pop. You couldn't, or you were into New Order and the Smiths. You wouldn't admit to listening to Motley Crue if you like New Order and the Smiths. Whereas in the 90s, you could listen to D-Light and also like Alice in Chains. And it might,
100%.
Completely into the Seattle scene, maybe more depressive types with their only bands they listen to are Nirvana and Screaming Trees and Alice in Chains.
Nice.
There's a personality type there. But yeah, you could listen to Sinead O'Connor and D-Light but also grunge and also be into punk, and you might be into Green Day, but that doesn't mean that you're only into Green Day, that you might also listen to some old punk like the Sex Pistols, hopefully, and Stiff Little Fingers and so on.
Right.
That there was just an invitation to listen to everything and open your ears and your mind. I see that more in the younger half of generation why. And maybe because my son's a cool kid who grew up in the city, he's definitely not listening to Sabrina Carpenter. Nothing wrong with Sabrina Carpenter. He's not so much into Chapel Rowan.
His
He
taste
kind
is a
of,
little bit deeper.
a while ago, when I was talking about like my typical weekly tirade about how much of a jackass Kanye West is, I was kind of like, do you listen to Kanye West? And he's like, everybody likes something that Kanye West did. Even, yeah, he's a jackass and a Nazi wannabe or whatever the hell he's doing this week. But
Yeah.
that your ears and mind are open to the different types of music you can listen to versus I'm a goth, I'm a pop fan, I'm a metalhead. There's not so much that thing anymore. So I think that it comes out of two things: that authenticity speaks to music fans, and I think you and I are music fans first before being podcasters or journalists
Agreed.
or whatever.
Yeah.
There's that aspect of that there's bands that we can see through, but the majority of bands, whether they can play a guitar like Hendrix or sing like, oh, I don't know, whether they can sing like Prince or Sinead O'Connor or whoever, that they mean it, and that's a big deal. And the other thing is that despite the boom in pop music on major radio airwaves, that rock and roll is not dead. That rock and roll can be a kind of a power punk pop band that I like, and I know the guys and I know the inside jokes like Fig Dish, or can be Madame Reaper doing her own kind of wavelength of what Lady Gaga is doing or what Alice Cooper has done. And that
Right.
I can put my head around all those things and see all those bands and me. I think the two things go together. So maybe a 90s child syndrome, that's what it is. We want rock and roll to still be alive, and rock and roll still is alive. And then also the authenticity. We say to the bands that we love and that the ones we're interested in, like, speak to me, tell me what you're about. Neptune Score is a little bit more on the mellow side for me, but I like what they're doing. And I think, number one, they're supremely talented musicians, especially for their age. And they get the fact that they got to play the game musically and they got to do shows. And I think they do what they like and they do what they want to do. And they're open to whatever the next challenge is. So
Yeah.
that's, I think, what the 90s and all the types of music from the 90s is about, to put a dissertation around it. But the music's really got to speak to you. And that's where it begins.
Well, that's a conversation I have with my wife a lot. And she's like, I can't explain it. It just makes me feel good. And so I can respect that, but I actually have like a definition, right? And so
Right.
you nailed it, Andy. Authenticity. Another thing that I wanted to briefly mention was that really hit me. So like as the 90s were coming in, I was just becoming a teenager. So I'm a couple years below you. And in the 80s, I was going to concerts. This thought was in my head. And then you actually said the band Motley Crue. I can remember going to a Motley Crue show, and a lot of the bands like them back then, Poison, Motley Crue, Warrant, these are all shows that I attended. The bands are dancing around the stage. They're running, they're wearing leather. There's fire, spandex, there pyrotechnics and everything. Nothing wrong with that. Metallica still uses that. But then I remember seeing Alice in Chains. I remember seeing Blues Travel. I remember seeing Rage Against the Machine. And I remember leaving these shows and some of my friends saying, man, I wish that they would. Rage might be a bad example because they do move around a lot. But like, I remember Alice in Chains just stood there.
There's no smoke. There's no smoke.
There's no smoke. And I was like, no, that's what I liked about it. It was just the music. There wasn't anything else. There wasn't any hoopla. And I can remember going home that night as like a young 13-year-old, just 13, and being like, something's going on here with me. I don't know what it is. Like, part of it was like, oh, these are what the older kids are into, and I want to be an older kid. It's sad. Like, I always spent so much of my teen years wanting to be older. And then when I got into my 20s and 30s, I just wanted to be younger. So, but the authenticity thing you mentioned, and I think that plays into just watching. I'm still a big fan. I get picked on by some of my friends. I'm still a big fan of Blues Traveler. I think they're excellent. And I remember the first time seeing them, they just stood on stage and played. And I was like, it's just all about the music, right? So you brought up some great points, man.
There's a look and a feel to the 90s that when you see it. So I'll give you two examples. I remember when I went to Miami University in Ohio, and there was a fraternity house that they're kind of like more like rock dudes that was right by where High Street begins, the main drag. And you would walk by and they'd be out there sunglasses with like a big ass woofer playing Alice in Chains, just looking freaking badass. You're like, they look pretty damn cool just sitting there listening to Alice in Chains all day. Similarly, I remember when I was probably right out of college, and there's these girls who kept running. One of these women, probably my age, had a convertible, and I would always see these two girls with like backward baseball caps listening to Check Your Head in a convertible, and I was just like, that's freaking badass too. And I
Right? Yeah.
like, if I was cool enough, I want to date one of those girls like that. Just whatever, it just looks right. So there's a '90s look and a feel and a flair, for kind of use like a Mike Judge term from Office Space, like that is
Flair.
not in your face. And here's what the look is. It's more like when you see it, when you see it, it just looks damn cool, and you're like, yeah, it doesn't really get any cooler than that, than what they're doing with the music, combination of the music and the look.
Yeah.
It's
And it
bad.
also, the songs weren't, I was like, I'm into this. Not every song is about girls. Like, I didn't mind that. But when I went back and looked at all the stuff from the 90s that I listened to, you look at every song title, right? And barely any of the songs from a lot of bands in these genres were about that. And it was a little bit darker, and it caused me to think more rather than just sing a song about cherry pie or whatever. So, well, Andy, I wish you luck on the film. I wish you luck on the writing. I wish you luck on the concerts. And I wish you luck on everything. I really appreciate you reaching out, and I really enjoyed our conversation. I really enjoyed also going back and listening to the episode that you and I recorded in 2022, I think it was, or early 2023. And so I wish you a lot of luck, man. And I want to continue to stay in touch. I follow you on a lot of the socials, so I see a lot of your posts and I enjoy them. And so keep it up, man. Keep up the great work, and thank you.
Thanks. It's fun talking about music, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah, it really is. I'm about to head out in a little bit to go do something that I haven't really done in a while, but I'm getting back into it now, and that's going and jamming with people. That was just, I did that every single weekend for 25, 30 years. And in the last 5-6 years, gotten away from it, life, busy, all that stuff. So this has been a pretty cool day, and it's going to get capped with a nice long jam later. So thanks again. It was great to talk to you.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Driving around in circles, singing, hey now, what was that sound? Lighting a match just for a freak, yeah. Then on the other side, I saw 50 yellow lines pushing up against the window. It was when almighty lightning struck. The Great Lake rose up behind, said, baby, you best turn around. So I went back to the shore and follow her pathway forevermore,
Thank you again for listening to this episode and my conversation with author Andy Frye. Remember, you can pick up Andy's book, 90 Days in the 90s, which I've read now twice and strongly recommend. You can get it in the bookstore at albumreview.net. Just go to albumreview.net, click on store, and then click on bookstore. Best of luck to Andy, as his book is now in the works of being optioned as a movie. If anything else, Andy and I are both encouraging you to check out some of the already established and current emerging bands of the Chicago music scene, because I believe it is truly special. And remember, if you're interested in any of the albums or books that I've discussed in this episode or previous episodes, go to albumreview.net and pick up a copy of your own. Listen to all my podcast album reviews at albumreview.net by clicking on the podcast tab. They can also be heard wherever podcasts are available, pretty much any platform. Please follow the show on your preferred platform so that you can get regular updates on new episodes. And also, if you guys would be so kind as to pop a quick review or rate the podcast, that helps move the needle and get the word out there. I do want to hear from you, so please email me your feedback, album review requests, and any questions you might have to gpotters at albumreview.net. That's GPOTTERS at albumreview.net. If you'd like to get regular updates on reviews, interviews, product, and music news, go to the homepage and join the mailing list. Visit us on LinkedIn and YouTube, and stay tuned for updates on Instagram, Facebook, and that thing they call TikTok. You can find me at Album Review Net. Okay, that's it. Drop the needle and keep listening.
That's all, folks.
Bye.
Take a trip down by the highway. Take a trip down by the highway. Take a trip down by